Chapter 10 of Crabbe's Journal 10, Crabbe by William Bell. She had large gray eyes, full lips that were a little dry and cracked, and long, sandy-colored hair. Thinking I was still dreaming, I closed my eyes again. Come on, try to sit up, said a human voice above me. Come on. Arms gripped me from behind and lifted me until I sat unsteadily. I rubbed my eyes and tried to hold them open. Bright sunlight made it difficult, shooting a little arrow of pain into my eyeballs. Finally, they focused on a woman, a tall, slender woman dressed in a red checked flannel shirt and jeans. She knelt in front of me and offered me a cup. Here, drink. I obeyed, still stupefied. I felt like I'd been asleep for a long time and I was completely disoriented. I drank down the delicious warm soup. The more I swallowed, the hungrier I got. Half draining the cup, I handed it back to her. She took it with rough, calloused hands, the nails short and a little dirty. Do you feel warm now? She said, a little like an interrogator in her tone of voice. Yeah, I guess so. Well, think. Do you or don't you? Yes, I'm warm. Good. Count from 1 to 10. What? Just do it, she commanded. Her voice was firm but not nasty. No cream puff, that's for sure. I counted, feeling a little silly. Okay, that's good. Her tone softened a little. Now give me your name and where you're from. I must have been fully to my senses by then because I balked at that one. No, I don't want to do that, I said. Why? Just because I don't want you to know. I could make something up. She smiled and then said, You too, eh? Well, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure your mind is working right. Hypothermia disorients the mind somewhat. You appear to be all right, though. What's hypothermia? She sat back and crossed her long legs, Indian style, and rested her hand on her knees. When you went over the falls, you almost drowned. The water in the river is very cold, and I pulled you out. When I pulled you out, you were already into shock. That's what hypothermia is, really shock caused by the cold, which lowers your body temperature. Eventually, it will kill you. Disorientation of the mind is one of the symptoms. Oh, I said weakly, and she smiled. Sorry, didn't mean to lecture. Want more soup? Yes, please. I'm awfully thirsty. She got up and walked over to where a blackened pot sat balanced on a ring of rocks around a little smokeless fire. What had she meant by saying, You too, eh? I wondered. She came back with more soup and handed me the cup. Thanks, I said. This is good. What's in it? Oh, let's see. She folded her long legs under her and sat down again. Fish heads, flour, some salt, pork, lily roots, onions. You might think I'd thrown up at that description, but it was the best soup I ever tasted. I was famished. It was hot, savory, full of tasty chunks of potato tasting stuff. How did you find me? I asked. I don't remember anything after I went over. I had to shift my weight because I began to notice a pain in my chest now that I was fully awake. Putting my hand to my ribs, I saw my left arm was bandaged from elbow to hand and splintered with two round peeled sticks. Funny, as soon as I saw the dressing, which was bright, flowery blue cloth, my arm began to throb. Careful, she warned. You've got a couple of cracked ribs. I've bound your chest. That's why it's hard to take a deep breath. Is it very sore? I nodded. Your arm was cut pretty badly, and it may be broken, but I'm not sure. I splinted it just in case. To answer your question, I saw you go over the falls. I was downriver a bit, putting out some night lines, and looked up just in time to see you disappear into the water. I thought you'd be dead by the time I got to you. It took me a while to fish you out of there, but everything seems to have worked out okay. I think you'd better go back to sleep now. You've had a near miss, and you need lots of rest. But I wanted to thank her and say something. We can talk later. There's lots of time. I didn't argue because I could hardly keep my eyes open and I felt weak. So, handing her the empty cup, I lay back and blanked out immediately. When I woke again, I was lying on my back. I imagined I saw a great blood colored bird descending on me, and it terrified me until I realized I was looking up at the nylon fly that moved slowly, billowing, and was lifted rhythmically by the cool wind. I relaxed. My ribs and arm hurt slightly, like the engine throbbing in the background. I could hear the wind rustling in the trees around the campsite, and every once in a while a crack or pop from a fire that glowed a dozen or so yards away. Soon I became aware of breathing near me, and I realized the woman was asleep right beside me. I looked at her. She faced away from me, curled up. She was fully dressed, boots and all, and had a hat on, one of those knitted toques your mother tries to get you to wear. She slept like that, I assumed, because I was in her sleeping bag. Who was she, I wondered, and what in hell was a beautiful woman doing way the hell? And gone in the middle of nowhere. Was she alone? It seemed so. She knew what she was doing, unlike me out here. One look at the campsite told me that. She could find and cook wild food. She knew first aid. She did a really professional looking job of fixing me up, and that face, a face that beautiful, you'd think, belonged in a classy drawing room and on the screen. I looked at the thick hair that spilled from beneath her hat and thought that truth is stranger than fiction. There lay Crabbe naked in a sleeping bag in the middle of nowhere, right beside a very attractive woman. Did I create fantasies from those ingredients? No. I rolled over, facing that friendly, comforting fire, and I fell asleep. The smell of the fire roused me to a morning already drenched in sunshine. I sat up in the bag with difficulty, yawned and stretched as much as my ribs and sore arm would allow. She was at the fire frying something that sizzled deliciously and smelled the same, her back to me. Beyond her, a snowy mist hid the water and skirted the edge of the forest. A beautiful scene, peaceful, with no traffic honks and screeches, no mother screaming at you to get out of bed. She turned and spoke in a voice that seemed to fit the scene. How do you feel this morning? Fine, I guess, still sore. Want to try to get up then? Not until I get my clothes. She laughed and pulled my togs from a line she had strung between two birch saplings. I got most of the blood out, she said as she tossed them to me. I dressed quickly, finding my boots and sat beside the fire. They were dry and toasty. I felt a bit wobbly when I walked, but otherwise my body seemed in decent repair. You're just in time for grub, she said, and handed me a tin plate. There were two small fish, fried golden brown, and a chunk of bread that gave off a hot, sweet odor that set my juices going. It was so delicious, washed down with strong hot tea. Strange tasting, but good. Later I found out it was Labrador tea. She picked herself and dried. We ate in silence. When I put down my plate and gulped the last of my second cup of tea, she ordered, "Let me see that arm." I held it out for her while she untied the bright cloth strips that held the splints in place. Then she asked me to move my arm around, twist my wrist, and so on. It hurt, but not badly. Good, she pronounced. It's not broken. I couldn't tell you for sure when you were unconscious. She changed the dressing on the wound, an ugly slash across my forearm, 2 or 3 inches above my wrist. She poured 2 more cups of tea from the blackened tin can that served as her teapot. We sat there for a while saying nothing, captured by the strange peacefulness of the fire, birdsong, and the wavelets at the shore, a small world under the huge blue dome of perfect sky. The mist had been burned off by the morning sun, leaving the air clean and still. I looked around the tidy, homey campsite. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on struck me about the place. The two-person tent, clotheslines, chopping block, a little lean-to with gear in it, were arranged in a wide semicircle around the fireplace that was made up of ring of stones that I took to be some sort of oven affair that made this also made of stones. We were about 20 yards from the water on a piece of land that rose gently from the bay, a sort of meadow 50 yards deep and 30 wide, carved out of the forest behind and sparsely treed with young white birch and spruce. There was a patch of sandy beach at the water's edge, but most of the shoreline was flat granite slab. The campsite was on a little bay edged with grass, almost closed off from the main part of the lake that could be glimpsed through the two granite arms clothed with juniper scrub. Then I saw it. This place would be impossible to find from the main lake. Marsh grass grew across the gap, at this time of year, of course. What I saw was the dead stuff from last year, and in the middle of summer it would be much thicker. The bay was like a secret harbor. Coincidence? Or has this strange, skillful woman chosen it for a reason? Now, suppose you tell me how it came to be that you tried to shoot trout falls in a canoe backwards. Her words jarred me from my speculations. I said nothing for a minute, torn between the fear of letting my secret out and a sense of obligation to her. The peacefulness of the setting made me feel secure for some reason. I figured in the end that I owed her an explanation. She did save my life, after all, but I wouldn't tell her everything. I started my narrative at Ithaca Camp, and I left out my name. The more I talked, the more unbelieving she looked. Occasionally, she'd ask me a question and shake her head in reply, but mostly she just let me talk. She was amazed that I took off without really knowing where I was going, and was totally shocked to learn I couldn't read a map or use a compass. It's already clear, she said, almost snapping at me, that you can't paddle a canoe. I went on. I got a little miffed when she laughed about the bear attack. I left out some of the results. What's so goddamn funny? I said angrily. I almost got killed. Oh, I doubt that. The bear was rolling you around. It was curious to see if you had any more food, or if you were food. She giggled this time. Giggled, for God's sake. If that old Bruin wanted to hurt you, you'd be a mass of claw marks now. You were smart to roll into a ball and lie still. I wasn't smart at all. I was terrified, and then I fainted. Yes, I know. It must have been horrible. I searched her face to see if she was making fun of me. Her eyes were serious and sympathetic. But you asked for it, she said. What the hell do you mean? I shot back, not satisfied with her sympathy. Well, look, it's spring. Bears have been out of hibernation for only a few weeks, and they're hungry, and it's around mating season, so they're also bitchy. And the ones in that neighborhood are well used to humans. What do? You throw peanuts around, spill fish oil all over yourself, and leave candies in your tent. You invited every bear within miles to check you out. All you needed was a sign and an ad on TV. She laughed again. So did I. It was pretty stupid of me, come to think of it. And then she stood up. Well, enough of this merriment. I've got to check the night lines. What are they? I asked. It's a way of fishing without being there. Can I come? Although I still felt weak and not really up to going anywhere, I didn't feel like being alone either. If you like, she said casually. She started walking toward the water. There was a little corpse of black spruce right at the shore to the left of the beach, and from it she lifted a 16-foot cedar strip canoe and placed it in the water, neat as you please. This was no weak woman, I'll tell you. She handed me a paddle. Put this at your feet. Don't try to paddle. You're too weak. Just in you get. In I got. After she showed me how to do so properly, she shoved off, and we headed out of the bay across the open water, then through the marsh grass at the gap. Once out, I turned and looked back toward the campsite. I had been right. The place was invisible. We were in a decent-sized lake, and to the left of us, a river called the North entered it. We moved upriver past a dense spruce forest that marched right to the shore. The deep water reflected the flawless sky, and I'll tell you, that woman could handle a canoe. After 20 minutes of swift, straight progress, we got into a strong current. The water got shallower, and occasionally a menacing boulder stuck a finger into the air, but she just took the boat exactly where she wanted to go. The roaring of trout falls came upon us suddenly as we rounded a bend. We moved slowly now, but steadily, and finally entered a small pool at the foot of the cascading water. She maneuvered us toward a little sand beach where a powerful current backed up on itself and left a calm spot. We, me with one arm, pulled the boat up onto the sand. The falls was about 20 yards across the turbulent pool and about 8 yards high. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it was Niagara or anything. And it was quite narrow because of those big boulders at the top that squeezed the river thin, but it's hard to describe the feeling of naked power and energy that it conveyed as a ton of water leapt to crash to the boiling rage into the black boulders scattered around the base. The woman said the pool was incredibly deep and a vicious tangle of opposing currents. She showed me where she'd pulled me out and pointed to what was left of my canoe, a shapeless mass of smashed red fiberglass jammed between two boulders, around which angry water boiled and churned. The packs were at the bottom of the pool somewhere. I'll tell you, I stared at that scene with my mouth hanging open for a long time. How on earth had I survived? I asked her how she'd fished me out. She very matter of factly, no bragging, like she was writing a newspaper report, she pointed here and there and described the events of how she got me out, carried me to the beach, and taken me home. It's a good thing the current is strong, she said. It pushed you to a relatively quiet spot of water, and I was able to get to you. I thought about it, hard, while she told it, tried to picture the whole thing. She must be incredibly strong, tough, and brave, I thought. She risked her life for me. She brought me back into the world. I stared at her in awe. Don't look at me like that, she said, embarrassed. I guess it's it's no big deal. You'd have done it for me or someone else. And then she headed toward her night lines. No, I wouldn't, I said to myself. I wouldn't have done it for anybody. And I followed her ashamed.